A mysterious virus swept across the globe. The infected became bloodthirsty and savage, yet they didn't lose their speed or their awareness. Facing a species this terrifying, human civilization stood on the brink of extinction. Rory was one of the unlucky ones. Not long after the outbreak, her husband was infected, and in a cruel twist, he even bit their only child. Rory had no choice but to put down the two most important people in her life with her own hands. For years passed in the blink of an eye, and the number of survivors grew smaller and smaller. The remnants of the old ruling class formed a group known as GMT. Under the banner of rebuilding human civilization, they recruited survivors in droves, promising armed protection and safety. But these comforts didn't come for free. Anyone who joined was forced to carry out the organization's orders without question. It was nothing less than selling their souls and surrendering their freedom. Those who eventually woke up to the truth and tried to escape the organization were given no second chances. GMT would immediately dispatch hunters to track them down. Officially, it was called a merciful judgment. In reality, it was nothing more than cold, bloody execution. They say time heals all wounds, but for Rory, the guilt never faded. All these years, she lived under the crushing weight of blame, convinced that she had failed to protect her daughter. If not for the constant presence of her father-in-law, Otto, Rory might have already followed her child into the grave. One day, she wandered alone to the riverbank. The familiar scenery stirred up memories of her lost daughter. But when she opened her eyes, the girl's shadow had already vanished. That was the moment Rory finally broke. Silent tears in her eyes, she raised her weapon, ready to pull the trigger. And then, a sharp neigh shattered the silence. Rory turned her head, and there it was, a magnificent chestnut horse standing by the river. On its back, clear as day, was the mark of GMT. Not far away, a man lay on the ground, unconscious and wounded. A wave of unease flooded Rory's heart. She knew all too well how dangerous GMT could be, and her first instinct was to walk away. But then she noticed something, a small dragonfly charm dangling from the man's backpack. Her daughter had loved dragonflies too. As Rory wrestled with her decision, the horse suddenly galloped closer, its eyes filled with something that looked like pleading. In the end, Rory couldn't turn her back. She made her choice. She would save the wounded stranger. Meanwhile, out in the forest, Rory's father-in-law was hunting when he suddenly spotted 3 GMT hunters moving through the trees. This place was far from their base, and he couldn't figure out why they'd come all the way out here. Back at the stables, Rory had already dragged the wounded man inside. For safety, she bolted the main gate shut before checking his backpack. Inside, she found some strange vials of liquid, and then something that nearly made her gasp. A vial of antivirus serum, produced by GMT. Rory had heard rumors about this before. The serum was said to be priceless, capable of saving someone bitten by the infected before the virus could take over. But it was almost impossible to make, and even within GMT, only the highest-ranking elites ever had access to it. When her father-in-law returned from the hunt, he warned Rory to be extra careful. The presence of GMT hunters out here wasn't random. They must be after something. Maybe even rounding up new recruits by force. But Rory barely heard him. She hesitated for a long time before finally revealing the truth, that she had taken in a wounded man. And he wasn't just anyone. For all his ragged appearance, he was carrying a vial of the serum. It didn't take long for them to put the pieces together. The hunters weren't here by chance. Their target was obvious. The man lying unconscious in their care had stolen the serum from GMT. Otto completely lost his temper. He cursed Rory out, furious that her reckless decision had now dragged them into serious trouble. Rory realized her mistake and reluctantly agreed that once the sun came up, she'd kick the stranger out. The brown horse beside them seemed to understand every word. It shook its head over and over, as if begging them not to abandon its master. But Otto was unmoved. He stormed out of the stable and told Rory to bolt the doors and windows tight. The night was when the infected were at their most active. Even though they had argued, Otto still went about things the way he always did, quietly preparing dinner. These days food was harder and harder to find. After hunting since morning, he had only managed to bring back 2 scrawny rabbits. But Rory didn't seem to appreciate just how precious a meal like this had become. Instead, she acted like a spoiled princess. She didn't touch a single bite, just stood up from the table and went back to her room. There, she clutched the stuffed toy that once belonged to her daughter, sinking again into memories of the life she'd lost. Hours passed, and Rory still couldn't sleep. Finally, in the dead of night, she crept back to the stables, wanting to check on the wounded man one more time. But to her shock, he was already awake. In an instant, he darted forward and pressed a finger to his lips, signaling Rory to stay absolutely silent. Turns out, an infected was prowling just outside the stable. At first, Rory and the stranger planned to wait quietly until it left on its own. But the brown horse suddenly let out a panicked neigh, and the zombie immediately lunged for the gate. The man reacted instantly, grabbing hold of the handle to keep it shut. Rory tried to help, but the infected managed to clamp its filthy hands around her throat. In that split second, the stranger snatched up a rifle, pulled the trigger, and the creature staggered back into the night. Once he was sure it was gone, the man spun around, demanding to know where his backpack was. Rory led him into the living room, where he finally spotted what he'd been desperate for, the vial of antivirus serum. Seeing it still intact, he exhaled in sheer relief. That was when he introduced himself. His name was Noah, and he wasn't a member of GMT at all. His son had been bitten, and with no other hope, Noah pretended to join the organization. Under that disguise, he managed to steal one of their rarest treasures, the serum. Morally questionable? Maybe. But it was the only chance to save his boy. Because everyone knew the truth. Those selfish GMT leaders would never waste the cure on an ordinary survivor. Rory listened in silence, feeling a knife twist in her heart. If only this serum had existed for her daughter, things might have been so different. After a quick patch-up of his wounds, Noah became restless. He had no time to lose. His son had already been bitten for 2 days, and if the serum didn't reach him soon, he'd turn. But Rory stopped Noah before he could rush out the door. She reminded him that nighttime belonged to the undead. If he left now, he'd never live to see his son again. Reluctantly, Noah listened. He would wait until daylight. What neither of them realized was that the GMT hunters had already zeroed in on their farmhouse. At first light, Otto walked into the living room and nearly jumped at the sight of a stranger lying there. Rory quickly rushed over, explaining everything that had happened the night before. Otto wasn't unreasonable. He only told Noah to leave as soon as possible. Noah gave a weak nod, but before he could even stand, his legs buckled. He collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Otto had checked his wounds the day before and had a suspicion. It wasn't infection, but a blood clot pressing against his airway. The only way to fix it was to cut into his chest. With steady hands, Otto made the incision. And sure enough, Noah's breathing began to return. But even though the worst had passed, he was in no condition to travel. Rory's heart twisted. Every hour they delayed was another hour Noah's son drifted closer to turning. In her mind, she couldn't shake the thought. Was this her second chance? To save the boy the way she had failed to save her daughter? Otto saw it clearly, the weight in her eyes. And in a grave voice, he told her, "If you feel this is your mission, then go. Save the boy. Maybe this is what you were meant to do." Suddenly, a shrill alarm split the silence. GMT hunters were closing in. Otto didn't hesitate. With a firm shove, he jolted Noah awake and ordered Rory to take him and flee on horseback. As for himself, he would stay behind to hold the hunters off. After a hurried goodbye, Otto armed himself to the teeth. Then, with deliberate steps, he marched straight outside. Calm but unyielding, he declared that this was his private land. But the lead hunter only sneered, saying that since the world had ended, all property now belonged to GMT, for it was they who upheld order in the chaos. Of course, Otto had never planned to win them over. His only goal was to buy Rory more time. He kept the hunters talking, dragging out every second he could. What he didn't know was that they had already sent one of their men around to the back door. Inside, Rory and Noah were just about to make their escape when a shadow fell across the room. Before the hunter could fire, Noah struck from behind with a brutal blow, then yanked the trigger first. The gunshot cracked through the night, igniting the battle. Otto seized the opening and fired, but his shot missed the lead hunter. In that instant, his advantage vanished. The hunters swarmed him, and though he fought with everything he had, Otto was riddled with bullets and dropped to the ground. But his sacrifice wasn't in vain. Thanks to his stand, Rory and Noah broke free. Watching the leader mercilessly gun down an old man was the breaking point. One of the female hunters in the group finally saw GMT for what it really was, not some noble protector of mankind, but a ruthless criminal syndicate preying on survivors. Right then and there, she decided she was done. The leader trembled with rage. By GMT's rules, walking away was punishable by death. But out of respect for their history as comrades, he let her live, spitting curses as he stormed off in pursuit of Noah instead. Meanwhile, Noah had reached the edge of a dense forest. The terrain ahead was far too rough for a horse, and he prepared to part ways once again. But Rory wasn't having it. Knowing he was still injured, she insisted on escorting him all the way back home. She confessed that helping him wasn't about charity. It was about easing the guilt of losing her own daughter. Hearing this, Noah finally relented. He pulled a small vial from his pack, explaining it was a concoction that could throw off the scent of the infected. But before they could even use it, a sharp gunshot cracked through the air. The hunter leader had caught up. Noah yanked Rory by the arm, the two of them sprinting deeper into the woods, the hunter stalking after them at a calm, deliberate pace, like a predator savoring the chase. Noah knew there was only one way out. Someone had to stay behind. He shoved the antiviral serum into Rory's hands, pleading with her to get it to his son no matter what. He rattled off the exact address, making sure she memorized every word. And with that, Rory snatched the pack and bolted into the dark forest, her footsteps fading as Noah turned to face the hunter alone. But Noah wasn't out of tricks yet. From his pack, he pulled a syringe of pure adrenaline, the last ace he'd been saving. As the drug surged through his veins, the frail, wounded man suddenly transformed, bursting with raw strength and speed. The fight with the hunter leader turned vicious. Blow for blow, strike for strike, the two men clashed under the fading light, neither giving an inch. But when night finally fell and the adrenaline began to wear off, Noah knew his time was almost up. With nothing left to lose, he set a trap. Using the echo of his own movements, he lured the leader straight into an ambush. Then, with one final desperate charge, Noah slammed into him, taking the fight to the ground. Noah raised his gun, ready to finish it, but a low, guttural howl cut through the night. The infected were closing in. Noah lowered the weapon. He wanted this cruel predator to feel it, to know the terror of being torn apart by the very monsters he had helped create. Quietly, Noah holstered the gun, shut his eyes, and waited. His wounds were too severe, the drug's aftermath too brutal. There was no surviving the night. The first zombie leapt, dragging him down into the dark. Meanwhile, Rory was still running through the endless forest. Her lungs burned, her legs shook, when suddenly, her foot snagged and she crashed to the ground. She scrambled back up, only to freeze in horror. A group of zombies stood waiting ahead. Heart racing, she spun around and dove behind a thick tree stump, barely breaking their line of sight. For a moment, she thought she'd slipped free, but in the chaos, another infected came barreling from the side, slamming her to the dirt. Desperate, Rory fought with everything she had, grappling, clawing, until she finally managed to drive her blade into the creature's skull. The body slumped, twitching. She'd survived, but the victory came at a price. Her arm was bleeding. The teeth marks were clear. Rory had been bitten. At this moment, the vial of serum in her backpack had become Rory's only hope for survival. But a cruel dilemma gnawed at her. Should she keep it for herself, or deliver it to Noah's son? Lost in thought, she suddenly glimpsed a familiar figure in her mind, her daughter. And with that fleeting vision, her decision crystallized. Just then, a few zombies shuffled near her. Maybe they sensed her impending transformation, or perhaps the scent-disrupting serum was working, but for some reason, they didn't attack. Rory dared not make a sound, not a single unnecessary movement. She held her breath and slowly, carefully, made her way forward. Finally, as the first light of dawn broke through the trees, she emerged from the forest. Across the open grassland stood a solitary house, Noah's home. She knocked on the door. A frail old woman appeared, holding a gun, her eyes immediately drawn to Noah's backpack. She opened her mouth to ask a question, but Rory said nothing. Without a word, she simply turned and walked away. The woman picked up the backpack and, almost instinctively, noticed the vial of serum inside. Though her son was gone, he had left behind something far more precious. Rory made her way alone to the riverbank. There, in the gentle ripples of water, she imagined her daughter smiling at her. Relief washed over her. She had made the right choice. In her final days, Rory had managed to save another life, giving hope to a new, growing existence. And that was the story of Forgive Us All. At its core, this was about a mother's journey of self-redemption. In a world where survival itself is already a struggle, she still found the strength to carry the weight of love, guilt, and sacrifice. Maybe that's why human civilization can never truly disappear, because of people like her. But now, let me ask you, if you were in her place, would you save yourself, or risk it all to save a stranger's child? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one.